G'day and welcome to another edition of the Aussie Ideas Man. I usually limit myself to the nonsense that goes on at Aptera Motors, but since it's been very quiet and since they're just about dead, I thought I'd do this one. There's lies, damn lies, and statistics, and on YouTube you'll find lots of videos that push a barrow and only give a distorted view of the truth. And I find this plugged-in video to be one of those. There are many, but this is about EVs, so it's a little bit close to Aptera. And I have experience with owning many cars over 50 years, plus the experience of owning an EV for the past 2.5, close to 3 years. So I'll just give a little bit more information than what is being presented by this woman who has a one-sided view of the worth of EVs. I'll qualify that what I add is just a little bit, or my personal views, of what is being left out. For somebody to form their own opinions, they need to look for all the information they can gather if they want to have an informed opinion, and one that is probably more correct than anybody else's. Having owned an EV for more than 2 years, I'll first say that there are many good things about an EV. It's not all one-sided. It's not EVs are all bad and ICE cars are all good. It's not EVs are all good and ICE cars are all bad. It's a mixture, and people's driving habits and needs determine which way they're going to lean. But the only way you're going to lean correctly is to know what your needs are and know the pros and cons of both ICE and EV. If you don't do this, and if you listen to one-sided YouTube videos, you will probably get the wrong vehicle for you. Now, as I said, I'll add just a few things, but they're not everything. One needs to search far and wide to get all the pros and cons of both ICE and EV. Now, there are a couple of myths that she supposedly busts, and I'm going to treat each one as a new video. So let's get started.
Are we there yet?
Are we there yet? Ah! Are we there yet?
No, but why aren't we there yet? I'm talking about electric vehicle adoption in America, or its slow pace. We are way behind other countries when it comes to ditching gas vehicles. On this plugged-in episode, I speak with 4 industry experts to find out why America hasn't yet put the pedal to the metal on EVs. The short answer, there's too much stigma against EVs.
That may be the short answer for her. There's too much stigma against EVs, but it's not the short answer. It's not just stigma, it's facts. So while she goes to debunk the stigma, let's hope she gets the facts right. But it's not the short answer for other reasons, besides stigma or facts. It's a complicated issue, and there's a lot more to it.
Stemming from good old-fashioned propaganda, so let's debunk it. First, I want to clear something up. EVs are not some new groundbreaking technology. The first electric vehicles looked like this, and in the 19th century, they were simply called horseless carriages. Now, I could do a whole episode on EV history, and honestly, maybe I will. But
an important part about the fact that EVs actually predated ICE cars and were actually selling well compared to ICE cars in the beginning is that under the circumstances, under the conditions of each type of vehicle, and each has changed over time, but under the circumstances at the time, ICE cars ultimately outsold EVs because of the superiority factor. EVs were inferior, but that was then, and because of changes to both technologies, now is a different ballgame. That early history is moot.
for the sake of staying on track here, know that EVs have been around for over 140 years.
It blows my mind. It's crazy. An electric car from 1909.
They're actually even older than gas-powered cars. Yet here we are in 2025, and all-electric vehicles only make up about 9% of America's new car market share. If we include plug-in hybrid EVs, which can run on both gas and electricity, that number increases to a measly 9.7%. Now that's compared to nearly 90% of all-electric vehicles in Norway, about 63% in Sweden, and around 30% in the UK and China. So
the propaganda and the myths surrounding EVs are the same worldwide. They have the same propaganda and myths in Norway. But the reason why Norway has 90% has nothing to do with the stigma around EVs, like her short answer gives you. Norway taxes ICE cars so heavily that people buy EVs because they can't afford the alternative. Norway has a system where the government manipulates what people can buy when it comes to personal transport. If America did the same, they would have 90% EVs. So you can't blame the stigma, the propaganda, the myths, or any of those things for America being way behind Norway. And those other governments, Sweden and the United Kingdom, they have varying levels of government interference that add some controls as to how people buy their next vehicle. If one was to research, you would find people, as I have found in Britain, who have bought EVs and wish they hadn't. In fact, my experience is that I bought an EV with a $6,000 government incentive and wished I hadn't. At the time, I was looking at a Renault Arcana as my next vehicle for my wife, and I believe that would have been the better choice 2.5 years later. But I'm not everybody, and people with different needs to me may be better off with an EV.
The question is, why is America stuck in first gear? I know EVs don't have gears. I just can't resist a car button.
My opinion is raw ignorance. I talk to so many people. I would never drive one. They're horrible. Don't they catch on fire? And like every time one of those is brought up, it's just this weird. I hate saying it, but it just strikes me as like propaganda by Chevron or Shell or the petroleum industry.
That's John.
While I tend to agree that Americans can have a lot of raw ignorance, I don't believe that's right. I believe when it comes to finding out what cars are on the market, Americans do know what there is available. You can't put it down to ignorance. Are they trying to allude to the fact that Norwegians are about 8 times more informed than Americans? In many cases, I'd like to think so, but logic tells me that's not possible.
Johnny Lieberman. He's host of the popular YouTube show Driving with Johnny, and his answer touches on some EV myths that we'll get into. But I want to say that Johnny isn't the only person I spoke with who believes that big oil fuels EV misinformation. Nikki Gordon.
There is almost no evidence that big oil fuels misinformation. In fact, big oil hardly has a motive. Oil is used for so much in industry in this world that if they lost a little market to EVs in public transport, it would be a pimple on an elephant to them. My first rule of thumb is when you debunk a myth, you prove your points first. Where is the proof that big oil is interfering? I've seen very little of it.
Bloomfield, founder and host of Transport Evolved, shared a similar idea.
It's a combination, like this perfect storm of political misinformation, fossil fuel lobbying. Lobbyists in America are very, very powerful.
For the sake of time.
So Nikki Bloomfield thinks that misinformation is what's causing the poor take-up of EVs in America. Well, Nikki, wasn't that misinformation also available in Norway, Sweden and Britain? Or do you think it was withheld from those countries? And have you proven any misinformation? This is just talk to sway the gullible. As we go on, I will just stick with information and judge it on its merits.
I'm choosing not to go down a rabbit hole of big oil propaganda against EVs. You can watch the 2006 film Who Killed the Electric Car for that. But I will tell you that big oil spent over $7 million on anti-EV policy advertising in 2021 alone. And that's just one of the things we know about. So yes, there are a lot of misconceptions about EVs, likely fueled by corporations who stand to lose big if Americans do go electric.
Once again, big oil might have spent some money, although I wouldn't call it an established fact. But had they spent that money, they would have spent it worldwide. It doesn't answer why America lags behind other countries. This is where I will end part 1. The first so-called myth, EVs are way more expensive than gas cars. And I'll just use my personal experience, but for those who are considering either of these types of vehicles, do more research.
Okay, what qualifies as expensive is subjective, but these days, EVs really don't cost that much more than gas-powered cars. Tom Bowen from Qmerit, the leader in EV charger installation, says too expensive hasn't really been a strong argument since 2021.
We're seeing a number of models coming out that make EVs much more accessible. Price points are down, volume and types of selection of brands, etc. models are increased significantly.
General Motors.
When he says things like price points are down, They are down from stratospheric heights. So yes, they've reduced in price, but they are still way more expensive than the equivalent ICE car. And in fact, there are all sorts of losses that you get even when it comes to equivalence. There's probably no such thing as an equivalent EV and ICE car, even if they're made from the same basic model. But I'll bring in my personal experience. When I looked at the BYD Atto 3, it was comparable, as much as you can compare, with, say, a Nissan Qashqai. The top end, the TI model Nissan, was almost the same price as the BYD Atto 3 in Australia. But it wasn't the purchase price that made it expensive. It's the long term, all things considered, money that made the Qashqai cheaper. While registration for the EV was a little cheaper, insurance was a lot dearer. And while saving money on fuel was considerably cheaper, resale value lost so much more that it made paying for the fuel a joy. My list price for the BYD was over $53,000, and less than 2 years later, I took it in to possibly trade it in on a $70,000 car, and I was offered $24,000 trade-in. $24,000. Under 2 years, almost $30,000 wiped off its value. Had I bought the Nissan, I probably could have traded it for $38,000 easily. I'm being conservative. So there's $14,000 more. Plus I'd paid more in insurance, a little less in registration, and a bit more less in fuel costs. And I think for one of the services, I paid close to $500 for a service for an EV. I won't look it up, but it was super expensive. Took me by surprise. So my experience is the BYD, even with a $6,000 government incentive, turned out more expensive than an equivalent ICE car.
And Ford have made billion-dollar investments in new assembly plants focused on more affordable EVs, including a new Chevy Bolt and a Ford truck starting at $30,000. Now, those are slated for 2027, but there are already similar price models out there. For example, one of the top-selling gas cars right now is the 2025 Chevrolet Equinox, with the starting price just under $30,000. Its twin, the Equinox EV, starts at just under $32,000. That's only a $2,000 difference. And considering the average new car price today is around $48,000, an EV for under $34K, it's pretty price friendly.
I think that blows out the water the assertion that EVs are more expensive than gasoline cars.
Not to mention,
2 words, tax incentives.
You might still qualify for local, state, or even utility incentives for EVs or home chargers. Even if an EV sticker price is higher, we also need to consider the total cost of ownership. One study compared the lifetime costs of electric versus gas vehicles of similar sizes and models. It found that small and low-range EVs cost drivers less, while longer-range sedan and mid-size EVs cost about the same as their gas counterparts.
The break-even point in most countries on EVs now is 2 to 3 years.
And it's a small sample size, but all 4 experts I spoke with for this episode say they are saving money by driving electric.
The Rivian we have, zero maintenance. I mean, I probably spent $15 on windshield wiper fluid over the 3 years. That's it.
How many pickup truck owners?
That's it, eh? $15 on windshield wipers fluid. Doesn't Rivian have service intervals? Did he get free servicing for all that time? I think there might be some lying occurring while they're supposedly busting myths. If you look at a lot of British YouTube videos, you will discover that, like me, a large proportion of EV owners are complaining about the overall expense of an EV compared to the ICE cars that they used to buy. Many are ruining the day they ever bought an EV. And that's just on cost, overall cost. In the early years of EV, the price gap was enormous and the overall expense was astronomical. And it is lowering a little. It's getting a little closer. But when it comes to this so-called myth being debunked, we are not there yet. EVs are still overall more expensive. Do your research. I think you'll find this is not a myth, it's more of a fact.
Owners can say that. There's also the potential fuel savings. And I say potential because, well, have you seen electricity prices lately? But State of Charge host Tom Malogny says you'll still see savings as long as you're mostly charging at home.
If you use public DC fast charging infrastructure, it's very comparable to gasoline, the cost. Mm-hmm. So, I urge people to charge whenever they can at home.
Unless, of course, you have convenient access to free public chargers, which are pretty sweet. The bottom line here, though, the argument that EVs are far more expensive than gas-powered cars simply isn't true.
If you are
Access to free public chargers in Australia is limited to the 7 kilowatt chargers in shopping centres. Nobody in their right mind would take a car to a shopping centre and put 80% charge in it. They'd be there all day and they would lose more money shopping just because they've got nothing else to do. That's a joke. Also, the price of charges on the open road equate to more expensive than petrol or gas in America for the average size car. But as I said, the money you save on home charging, you have to have thousands of dollars worth of equipment, not only the solar on your house roof, but the charger as well that you have to buy. Half of my government grant went to buying the charger. Fortunately, I had a 6.5 kilowatt home solar in the first place. But if you're going EV and you don't have a home solar, you can factor in around $10,000 to set yourself up with it. When you buy an ICE car, you don't have any of that expense.
able to charge at home, you are able to get a good overnight charge, you're going to save a lot of money. Obviously, tie that with a solar system, with a battery, you're going to be quids in if you can invest that money up front.
Well, that's it from me for part one. Bye for now. Stay safe.